There's a name history remembers for ruling Europe with money, and the name it tried to erase for mastering the East. The Rothschilds built their empire in plain sight. But this family operated in the shadows of a different kind of power. You know the story of Western finance. But few recall the dynasty that cracked the code of global trade a century before the world caught up. They were the Sassoons, a line of merchants, exiles, and architects of a new economic order. This is the story of how a single family cast out and left with nothing came to weave a web of capital that connected empires. Welcome to a world where money had no borders and loyalty was to the ledger. Their journey starts not in a European capital, but in the ancient city of Baghdad. David Sassoon was born into a respected Jewish family in 1792, his father a treasurer for the Ottoman powers. For years, they navigated the complex trade routes linking Persia and beyond. But in the turbulent world of empire, favor is a fickle thing. When political winds shifted, the Sassoons became targets. Persecution forced their hand. In 1829, David gathered his family and fled, leaving everything behind except his deep understanding of commerce and his faith. His destination was Bombay, a humid port city under British control. It was the crucial link between Britain's industrial heart and the vast markets of Asia. For a man with nothing, it was a blank slate of immense possibility. David arrived without wealth or formal title. His asset was something more valuable, a visionary grasp of supply and demand. He knew what British industry craved, what Indian lands could grow, and what Chinese markets would purchase. He saw profit in the chaos others fled. He began with textiles, moving cotton and yarn through the ports. But his true innovation was cultural. He built a network that transcended religion and caste, employing Jewish, Indian, and Arab traders. He spoke their languages. In a colony divided by strict hierarchies, he proved that trust could be the strongest contract of all. Then, he identified the commodity that would define his legacy: opium. The British East India Company held a monopoly, shipping Indian-grown opium to China where its use was banned but rampant. This illicit trade was the underworld of 19th century commerce, and Sassoon didn't just join it, he systematized it. He wasn't a smuggler on the docks. He was the financier, the insurer, the logistical mastermind. His firm, David Sassoon & Co., became the invisible engine of Britain's lucrative China trade. His ships sailed with imperial backing, his warehouses overflowing. To some, he was a merchant of human misery. To others, a pragmatic architect of order and cash flow. Regardless of the moral calculus, the outcome was undeniable. David Sassoon amassed one of the largest fortunes in Asia. But what did he build with a fortune forged in controversy? He poured his wealth into the foundations of modern infrastructure. He financed factories, constructed ports, and established mills in Bombay that provided work for thousands. He erected synagogues, hospitals, and schools, many still standing today. He understood that profit was not an end, but a means to build something lasting. He didn't just move goods. He built the very systems that moved them. This was the core of the Sassoon strategy. Turn fluid capital into solid, permanent assets. Every pound earned from opium or cotton was reinvested into property, industry, and influence. This foresight paid off handsomely. When the American Civil War choked off cotton supplies to Britain, Indian cotton became essential, and the Sassoons controlled its flow. When Chinese silver payments destabilized markets, they managed the exchange. Every global crisis was a local opportunity. But such success breeds envy. The British East India Company watched them with a wary eye. Chinese authorities resented them. Rival firms tried to break their hold. The Sassoon defense was family. David dispatched his sons across the globe to Hong Kong, Shanghai, London, and back to Baghdad, each one a new pillar in the family's international enterprise. They weren't just merchants. They were agents of capital, following the Union Jack and financing its expansion. When David Sassoon died in 1864, his empire was a global force. His sons, now sophisticated financiers, carried the torch. Elias David Sassoon, his eldest, pushed deeper into China, setting up operations in Shanghai and Hong Kong as the Opium Wars forced those ports open. This marked the dynasty's evolution from merchants of goods to bankers of empire. Shanghai in the late 1800s was a city of stark contrasts, part Chinese metropolis, part colonial playground, built on opium wealth and foreign loans. Here, the Sassoons provided the credit to build a financial capital. They financed shipping, built godowns, and acquired land along the Bund, the iconic waterfront that would become a symbol of wealth and ambition. By the 1880s, they were dubbed the Rothschilds of the East, not because their wealth was identical, but because their strategy was the same: leverage mobility into market dominance. They saw opportunity where others saw only foreignness. Another son, Albert Abdullah Sassoon, returned to Britain, was knighted by Queen Victoria, and mingled with London's elite. The circle was complete, from Ottoman exiles to British aristocracy. The empire had richly rewarded its financial architects. Yet, beneath this polished veneer of respectability, the foundation of their wealth remained the opium trade. After Britain's victory in the Second Opium War, Chinese ports were inundated with the drug, much of it on Sassoon vessels. Legal under British rule, it was catastrophic for Chinese society, spreading addiction at every level. The 19th century global economy thrived on this very paradox. Moral compromise on one side, immense profit on the other. The Sassoons didn't create this system. They simply became its most efficient operators. They were the hidden circuitry of empire, reliable, effective, and utterly indispensable. The Sassoon paradox is this: their ascent was a masterpiece of strategy, courage, and brilliance, yet it was facilitated by a willingness to overlook profound human cost. But empires change, and so must the dynasties that serve them. By the early 20th century, as the opium trade waned and finance grew more complex, the Sassoons transformed once more. They were now bankers, real estate magnates, and philanthropists. They constructed Shanghai landmarks, luxury hotels in India, and investment firms in London. They had become respectable, almost untouchable, but history's memory is selective. Europe wrote the history books, so the Rothschilds remained household names. The Sassoons, whose power was rooted in the East, were gradually forgotten. What they engineered wasn't merely wealth. It was a blueprint. A method for conducting business beyond borders, for aligning financial gain with imperial ambition, and for transforming exile into enduring influence. The Sassoons demonstrated that in an interconnected system, capital needs no homeland, only a network. That idea didn't disappear with them. It became the bedrock of our modern world. By the 20th century's dawn, the Sassoons had completed their arc from refugees to nobility. Their name graced the society sections of London's papers. Their philanthropy funded cultural institutions. Their mansions in Bombay, Shanghai, and London showcased immense opulence. It was the ultimate story of imperial capitalism. In Shanghai, the younger generation built a financial powerhouse. E.D. Sassoon & Co. grew into one of Asia's most formidable firms, dealing in textiles, banking, and insurance. They were instrumental in reshaping Shanghai into a global financial hub. The Sassoon House, completed on the Bund in 1929, endures as the Peace Hotel, a permanent mark on the city's skyline. For decades, they symbolized stability. When monarchies fell and markets trembled, the Sassoons adapted. They grasped a timeless truth: control the movement of goods and credit, and you shape the course of history itself. But the 20th century brought changes no dynasty could fully anticipate. The British Empire, their primary patron, began to weaken. Nationalist movements gained strength across Asia. The old trade routes that were their lifeblood were turning into political battle lines. Then, in 1929, the Great Depression erupted, devastating international trade. Factories shuttered, shipping stalled, currencies imploded. The far-flung Sassoon enterprises suffered heavy blows, yet they adapted again. In India, they invested in manufacturing. In China, they shifted to property. In Britain, they deepened their financial ties, but a deeper shift was underway. The era of family-run merchant dynasties was closing, replaced by the age of the faceless corporation. The intricate networks of trust and blood that once defined their power were becoming obsolete. By the 1930s, the opium trade was gone. Their textile businesses faced fierce competition. In China, political chaos and Japanese invasion shattered the world they had helped construct. As World War II loomed in 1938, the Sassoon companies remained profitable, but the family was dispersed. Shanghai was no longer secure, India was marching toward independence, and London was preparing for war. The global network that had been their greatest strength now left them fractured. What becomes of an empire when the world it helped build moves on? After the war, the Sassoon influence quietly dimmed. Their Asian assets were seized by new governments or lost to revolution. Their London firms were merged into larger financial entities. Some family members continued in banking and charity work, but the name no longer commanded its former awe. By the late 20th century, the Rothschilds of the East were a mere footnote, their story buried beneath the narratives of the nations and multinational corporations that inherited the system they helped design. But their legacy didn't vanish, it evolved. The Sassoons were pioneers in proving that capital can move faster than politics, that a family or a firm can rise above national boundaries, languages, and local laws. They mastered a protoform of globalization centuries ahead of its time. Their rise exposes an uncomfortable reality. Empire is not merely about military might. It's about who funds the wars, the infrastructure, and the upheavals, and who profits from them. In this light, the Sassoons didn't just serve the British Empire. They were an integral part of its financial core. Their story holds up a mirror to our own time. Today's corporate giants, the Googles, the Amazons, the massive investment funds operate on principles the Sassoons perfected long ago. They don't conquer with soldiers. They conquer market share. They don't enforce loyalty through force but through economic dependency. Their empires are digital, not territorial, but the underlying structure is strikingly familiar. Like the Sassoons, they navigate across nations, often operating beyond the full reach of any single government. They use scale as leverage, efficiency as a competitive weapon, and access as a form of control. They profit from global imbalances, the gap between desire and affordability. And, like the Sassoons, they often frame it all as inevitable progress. But history moves in cycles. The very forces of global trade, political instability, and technological shift that propelled the Sassoons to greatness are now testing modern titans. What occurs when the system that enabled your rise can no longer support its own weight? The Sassoons ascended because they were masters of risk. Their decline began when they assumed the stability they knew was permanent. No network, no fortune, no dynasty is eternal. Only the frameworks they leave behind endure. You can still find their fingerprints today in the architecture of Shanghai's Bund, in the old mills of Mumbai, in the institutions of the City of London. Their mark is invisible, yet indelible. The Sassoons demonstrated that exile can be the seed of empire, that faith can be woven into finance, and that wealth can outlast the nations that hosted it. But they also left a cautionary tale, one our modern world consistently overlooks. That when profit becomes the sole guiding principle, and money the only passport that matters, history's final judgment won't dwell on your ingenuity. It will record your consequences. Every empire constructed on a foundation of imbalance eventually settles its account. And the ledger of history always comes due. If this story shifted your perspective, please support the channel by hitting the like button and make sure you resubscribe to Rich Root Official. We uncover the hidden patterns of history, one thought at a time.